Part three of our exit interview series as we make sense of the past season for a trio of Heat players and we look ahead to what's next. Can Duncan Robinson become a rotation player again? Will Max Strus be able to fend off challengers for his starting job? And will Caleb Martin keep bringing those high flying dunks in a Heat uniform? We'll answer that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Heat. Almost forgot there for a second. Your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However you may be listening on YouTube or Odyssey or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I am David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. 6 players down. We've been talking about them in our past couple of episodes through our exit interview series, so make sure to go back and check those out. We asked big questions about Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro, and others. Great episodes that I think you'll absolutely enjoy. But today, we'll be shifting a little bit to talk about some of the other role players on this Heat roster. We'll talk about Max Strus, who suddenly emerged as a viable candidate to become a starter in this Heat rotation. Will he be able to retain that position next year? We'll also talk about Caleb Martin, who stood out as one of those role players during some limited playing time throughout the regular season. But we'll start off with a guy whose role reduced drastically throughout the regular season and in the postseason. That's Duncan Robinson. In his 4th season in the NBA, Duncan wound up starting 68 games, playing in 79 total regular season games, but a longtime starter who seemed like a perfect complement alongside Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, and others because of his three-point shooting prowess, suddenly was taken out of the starting lineup in the midst of a 4-game losing streak, or following a 4-game losing streak. Of course, that same streak during which Jimmy Butler challenged Eric Spoelstra on the sidelines. Not a great time period during the Miami Heat's regular season. Otherwise, a great success. But, Duncan, again, had struggled all season long, wound up, in the heels of his $90 million offseason contract the previous summer, wound up falling out of favor, wound up barely playing in the postseason at all. And here we are now as we look ahead to the 22-23 season. What's the next step for Duncan Robinson? What are your takeaways from this past season for Duncan, Wes?
Well, he obviously got started with that really rough shooting slump right out of the gate. And, people conflated that with the $90 million contract extension that he got and basically said that he wasn't living up to that extension. And I think a lot of that got into his head. But as the season went on, he found his shooting stroke. He ends up shooting plus 37% from three-point range, still made 232 threes in the regular season. That was tied for the 7th most in the league. All right, and his percentages are right up there with the best of the high-volume three-point shooters in the NBA, right? He was a percentage point less than Steph Curry, who shot 38% from three this last season. So Duncan Robinson did find that three-point stroke. He's still one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA and should be regarded as such. But we saw his ceiling. We saw his ceiling specifically defensively. Like I know that he got on his podcast earlier this week and said that it's up to him to get better defensively so that he can get onto the court. I don't know how much better he can get defensively. All right. Look, I really like Duncan Robinson. I love the work he's put in. I think his work ethic is really underrated at this point. And a credit to him for getting that $90 million contract. But
no doubt.
He's still, he's a guy that went undrafted for a reason. He's not the best athlete in the world. And there is a ceiling to those kinds of guys. You can work harder. You can get stronger. You can improve your lateral quickness. Those are things that you can improve. And maybe he can improve marginally there. But I do think we're looking ultimately at a guy who is a three-point specialist who is going to have inherent ceilings to what he could do defensively. He fouls a lot. He gets, caught biting on pump fakes. He gets caught reaching a lot. He's pretty slow, so he gets blown by the better athletes. And in the regular season, it's not that much of a big deal, David. Right. But when you get into the playoffs and you're dealing with elite talent every single night, then that's when we see it become a big deal. And that's when he really fell out of the rotation completely.
Absolutely. Look, at this past week, Pat Riley speaking about Duncan, calling him a specialist and saying that he took a step back this season. So at least acknowledged throughout the franchise and in the front office that Duncan was not on par with what they expected for him this year. And that's that's pretty much what my takeaway from this piece or season is. Well, I hate to say this, and I feel like I'm adding fuel to a fire that I don't really feel needs to be burning. Like the public perception of Duncan, because he's white, because he's the typical NBA player, because he doesn't do anything other than shoot threes and all this discourse about what he is as a player. I hate it. I really do. Like as you said, I am a fan of Duncan's. I like his personality. I like his work ethic. I like what he brings to the table. He's fit in through very different teams. He was there during the Justice Josh Richardson era, playing alongside Dwayne Wade. He weathered that storm, became a starter alongside Jimmy Butler at a point in time when Jimmy was being labeled a cancer across the NBA and a malcontent and everything else. Somehow Duncan wound up finding a way to thrive. He gets rewarded with a well-earned contract at the time. But now, my takeaway, unfortunately, and this is kind of a hot one, I think he's the biggest mistake the Heat front office has made since Hassan Whiteside.
Wow.
Yeah, and I hate saying that. And it's not because of Duncan necessarily as a player, but because they don't have a plan for him. They don't know what to do with him. And that's, I think, on their fault, on the coach's fault, and partly on Duncan's fault. Like Duncan was just as bad defensively this season as he was last year. I don't think he took a step back. I just don't think he took a step forward. I think they thought they were going to pay him $90 million and go, well, hell, all of a sudden he's going to turn into a supreme athlete. It doesn't work that way, and they should have recognized that. This is on the front office, not on Duncan Robinson. And I think that's the problem is everybody keeps saying it's Duncan's fault. Duncan's a bum. Trade Duncan on all this stuff. He got the contract. No player should ever turn down a contract. Plenty of players have, and that's a stupid decision. Take the money when you can get it, just like the rest of us would. Having said that, like the front office clearly had no plan. I think they didn't understand how to play him alongside PJ Tucker, Kyle Lowry, the new additions to this roster. They saw something there and they said, you know what? We're in it to win it. We have to make a change. And now all of a sudden we're stuck with this $90 million problem. And I hate that I keep making air quotes.
No, but they thought that by getting Kyle Lowry to replace Goran Dragic, that now all of a sudden in that backcourt, you have one plus level defender who can make up for his shortcomings defensively. And that proved not to be true.
Right.
And it wasn't that big of a deal, really, until we got to like the Philadelphia and the conference finals.
Oh yeah, okay.
And it wasn't a deal until you got deep into the playoffs, and it wasn't as big of an issue in the bubble, but it was a really big issue this season. And for whatever reason, that was the case. Teams just figured out that they could target him. You're getting to and you kind of you're leading me to my question here with him this offseason is what's his value? Because the Heat are going to explore trading Duncan Robinson. We know that. They're going to see, okay, what can we get for Duncan and a first-round pick or Duncan by himself? Like, they're going to be shopping him around. Yeah. I still think that they're probably higher on Duncan Robinson than other teams are, but there are going to be other teams. There are going to be other teams who certainly look at Duncan Robinson and the fact that he is an elite three-point shooter and say, we could use that. Like, maybe we...
Is there a market, though? Is there?
I don't know. That's my question. I really don't know. At $19 million, $20 million, I don't know. And that might be why you have to attach a first-round pick to him. Because he has value as a three-point shooter. Yeah, I just don't know that he has value at that contract, to your point.
I mean, why not invest on, say a Garrison Matthews or a Joe Harris or somebody else like that? Like there's other options out there. And I think there are other shooters that could step up and fill that role without getting paid that kind of contract. And yes, he has not championship experience, but he's played on the big stage before. He's been into the finals. That does certainly, that lends itself to adding more value. But at the same time, no doubt. My big offseason question for him, as far as the front office is concerned, they should ask him if there's any place he doesn't want to go, because I think he deserves. He deserves to choose a spot if he can.
He's not good enough. He's not good. It doesn't work for it. I just don't know that he's going to be able to choose. I don't know. Like, obviously, if it's between like 2 or 3 different locations and you're like, all right, now take your pick. But it's not like Duncan Robinson can be like, you know what, I really want to go back home to Boston. And it's like, all right, yeah, we'll definitely deal you to the Celtics then. Like, that's just not going to happen. But
I don't want him shipped to like Minnesota like they did for James Johnson or something like that. Because I think it's,
he could end up in Minnesota. That's actually one of my
potential trade
possible locations.
All right.
You're going to have to take bad money back for Duncan Robinson. You're not going to trade Duncan Robinson and get like some, everybody wants to throw him into a deal for Jeremy Grant or Harrison Barnes. Like, good luck. Like that's just not where he's at right now. If you're going to move him
for Duncan Robinson straight up, that's all it takes.
it was like I saw a fake trade on the internet earlier today where it was like Duncan Robinson and Omer Yurtseven for Christian Wood, and everybody was like, Omer Yurtseven's better than Christian Wood. Not even talking about Duncan Robinson. Like all the comments were like, and I don't want to get into that, but that's basically how
That's
fans view Duncan Robinson. It's almost like as a
wow.
throw-in at this point.
Wow.
But I that's you're gonna take bad money back. It's whether or not that bad money can play even a little bit for you in the playoffs because Duncan Robinson didn't. Do you have a job for him over the summer?
I do. Selling anything door to door. Like the most humbling job I ever had. Not even as an adult, like as a late teen, basically, just going door to door. Where I thought was, something that I really was interested in, which was, the environment and trying to help save it and doing, going door to door. And it was just the worst job in the world, getting the door slammed in your face multiple times. And to me, that would be like the kind of
Were you
humbling
doing that down
experience.
here in Miami?
Oh, hell yeah, I was
Oh,
during
so
the
you got the
summer
heat?
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh,
it's the heat, the humidity, going door to door to ask people to contribute money to help save the environment. The big
yeah.
answer I got 9 out of 10 times, like 90 out of 100 times was get the hell out of here. It
Yeah.
was just like not the most pleasant experience. So to me, that's a kind of humbling experience that Duncan needs to recognize so that he can appreciate his NBA experience and continue to work at his craft. Because I think that's basically what I had for him. Do you have a
I've
summer job for him?
Yeah, I want him to make a docu-series on his offseason because I think it's he's already doing the video podcast and all that stuff. Like I want a straight up docu-series. I want to know the turmoil. I want to know the drama. Oh my God, this rumor is happening here. Because he pays attention to all this stuff. Like,
That big money.
yeah, that's what I want. I want him just to work on a docu-series on his offseason.
Yeah, nice. Like kind of the last dance sort of thing, but the last summer or whatever.
The
That,
last
that would be
Duncan.
great. He took that personally. Anyway, we'll move on and we'll ask questions and answer them about Max Strus and whether or not he can continue being a starter, as well as Caleb Martin, who wound up emerging as a significant role player. But before we do that, just a reminder that this episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net, your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals, Major League Baseball, and of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA to UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, we have an important favor to ask all of you. We put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. I know it's hard to believe, but we can. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like, what you don't like about Locked On Podcasts. Go to lockedonpodcasts.com. That's Locked On Podcasts with an S.com/survey right now to get started. Everyone that completes the survey will have a chance to win one of 10 Ticketmaster gift cards worth $100. So please fill out the survey, and thanks in advance for your help. We're going through our exit interviews. This is part 3 of the series. We've had a lot of fun talking about players on this Heat roster, and now we're going to talk about one of the players that really wound up having a significant amount of growth during the regular season. That's Max Strus, kind of a casual afterthought in the summer. Of course, he had that big summer league explosion there where he had a nice game winner at the buzzer. Had a couple showings there. He hadn't really seen much for him over the last season with Miami, but he's rewarded with a contract, a 2-year deal. And then all of a sudden, he comes off the bench. He's playing significant minutes. He winds up playing when Jimmy Butler or Kyle Lowry or anybody gets hurt. He winds up playing, stepping in, and winds up having a great spark off the bench. A role that Tyler Herro had been filling. All of a sudden, you're getting that kind of energy from Max Strus as well. And while he starts to, he struggles defensively at times, he's not much of a playmaker. He shows a few flashes of athleticism, however, and he also winds up improving defensively to the point where he had really big moments, significant moments throughout the NBA postseason. And he was a huge factor in helping Miami get to where they did, Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So to me, that's the big takeaway really about his season, is that what an incredible success story he is to be able to make that kind of in-season growth. I don't know that I've ever seen anything quite like that, to emerge from a role player, maybe your 9th, 10th. Remember the early questions about this roster during last offseason is, does Miami has all the talent in terms of Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker and championship experience and Bam and Jimmy, etc. But do they have depth? All of a sudden, you're getting guys like Gabe Vincent, Max Strus, Caleb Martin, who we'll talk about, and others step up. And all of a sudden, Miami winds up looking like the deepest team in the NBA. So what was your big takeaway from the series? Season, excuse me.
From Max Strus, it was
Yes.
that the Heat can just keep finding these guys. We talk about Duncan Robinson. Maybe they overreacted with that salary, but they just can keep finding these dudes. And with Max Strus, he's a better athlete. I think there is upside there defensively. There's still things that he needs to iron out there. And the fact that he did struggle from 3-point range during the playoffs is a concern. So there is still a ceiling there. But he's an ace 3-point shooter with defensive chops, and he really put the work in to get better. You like what he could do off the dribble as well. I think with Max Strus, you have a guy who is a rotation player in the NBA for sure. You love the confidence that he shoots with. He doesn't get bothered. He seems pretty immune to slumps or even knowing that he's in a slump when he is in one. And he's able to make those big shots. I mean, we always think, we talk about Game 7 with Jimmy
Ignitable.
Butler. We take with ignitable, Jesus. We talk about that missed shot with Jimmy Butler, but like to get to that point where it was a one possession game, it took a really big Max Strus 3, didn't it? And so, he could play up in those moments. And it feels like he is the 3-point specialist on this team. Now, my question is, I don't think that it's his job to lose. I think that the shooting guard spot is pretty up in the air going into next season, regardless of whether or not the Heat make any major type of roster moves. I think Tyler Herro will have a claim to it. If Vic comes back, I think he could have a claim to it. I think it's going to be a job that's won in training camp and throughout the regular season, because as we've seen, it can change. If he's not a starter, what is he? Is my biggest question.
That's a great question. Because he's also looking at like the last year of his deal. Like this is his best, potentially his last opportunity at a significant payday. And so I think he recognizes that. And if nobody else, his agent certainly recognizes that. And so there's an understanding that you've got to put in the work this offseason to get to another level. Like I would not be surprised to see Max come in like 10 pounds of muscle, just having worked 3 a days and, that kind of next level kind of growth, because I mean, this is it. This is your payday. This is your opportunity. And yes, there could be another deal down the line, but you show out this year, and whether it's Miami or another team, and we'll ask this question next offseason, he's going to get paid if he winds up having a productive season. If to your question though, if he's
and I
not
wonder
a starter,
if having paid Duncan Robinson, the Heat will be more reluctant to pay Max Strus, right? Because everything that we like about Max, and I think that there's a higher ceiling there.
Yeah,
you would understand if there's some trepidation.
Yeah, and that's actually my question for the offseason is how do you not become Duncan Robinson? Because, Duncan was, I'd say, a fan favorite. Everybody appreciated his 3-point shooting. Maybe there was recognition of his limitations and things of that sort, but it was okay because why? He was putting up 15 points on, 42% 3-point shooting. Like he was an ace 3-point shooter and everybody was okay with that. That was his specialty. He was able to do it. And I think somehow everybody wound up turning on him because of the slump. Now for Strus, while there is some diversity in his game, some versatility, like how do you avoid becoming this? And I know this is something that he's mentioned. He doesn't like being necessarily compared to Duncan. They're completely different players, different styles, etc. But it's going to happen. Like it's not that it's necessarily a narrative, but there's going to be this preconceived idea of like,
I mean, they're 3-point shooters. I think it's fair enough.
Undrafted players,
yeah.
They're going to get rewarded with a contract. Even if he has a great season, will Miami go, well, we just paid Duncan $90 million. We were able to find somebody to take his salary off our hands. We can't pay you that much. We won't. We just won't make that mistake because we don't know what's going to happen next. Yeah. And so that has to be a concern for him moving forward. I don't know. Look, I think right now he's probably still the better option to start. Like over him, over Duncan, over Victor Oladipo, over Tyler. And maybe it's just a recency bias because I know that we've kind of flip-flopped on this throughout the season, depending on what Miami needs, if they need a certain spark or something like that. But, he just adds just enough outside of the 3-point shooting to make him more of an interesting option. And yet there's the balance there between the rest of the lineup. He does provide that spark from 3-point range. Oladipo has got a completely different game. Tyler, a completely different game that I think right now is better suited for coming off the bench.
Yeah, and Oladipo's a free agent, so we don't know what his future is. But I'm with you. Like Strus checks the major 2 boxes that you need at that spot, which is can you space the floor? Yes, and can you play better defense than what you were getting before? And the answer to that is yes. And if you think that he's going to continue to improve defensively, like Strus, his goal, like I know everybody labels him as a 3-point specialist right now, and that's his reputation. And I think it's an accurate one. As much as he wants to say he can hold up defensively, he still does get targeted there. He does. Yeah. The next step for Max Strus is to go from 3-point specialist to 3-and-D. He needs to earn that 3-and-D label. Once you have that, then all these other comparisons and the trepidation of paying him, all that stuff goes away, because now it's a really valuable type of NBA player, whether that you're starting or off the bench or not. My summer job for Max Strus, he's that annoyed bartender who gets like really annoyed once you ask him for like that 3-step drink. It's a crowded bar. It's packed. It's probably a sports bar. It's probably in his hometown of Chicago or around there. And he wants to be just handing out domestics and well cocktails all day. And then some girl walks in and asks for a mojito, and he just gives her so much attitude. Gives her, and like the bar's
we don't have
packed.
fresh
Like,
mint leaves here, lady.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So I got Max Strus as the annoyed bartender at the local sports bar.
I like it. My summer job for him was a movie theater attendant. I know it's not like a big job anymore, but I think it gives him the opportunity. Again, another humbling experience similar to what I had proposed for Duncan. He gets to interact with people because he's a little not surly necessarily. Like there's a friendliness, a charm to him. He's certainly a likable enough guy, but he doesn't like talking to people necessarily.
Yeah, he's got a little bit of RBF.
That's the vibe I get from him. But having said that, I think he also can take advantage of the theater itself to watch film, to again lead into that question I mentioned about avoiding Duncan Robinson, following the same path as Duncan, and wind up again exploring other things in his game and leaning into those so he can continue to show that versatility that earned him the starting role. That's kind of what I saw for Duncan. Bartender, every time I think of summer jobs, I think of more like teens, kind of thing. Not necessarily as bartender, but I guess you could be a teen bartender, right? I mean, you don't have to
be bar back at the very least.
There you go, with a towel over his shoulder. That makes a lot of sense. All right,
good look.
Well, we'll talk about Caleb Martin. I was big on his addition to the Miami Heat last offseason, and it wound up being somewhat prescient because he wound up being a significant contributor, if nothing else, being a very memorable addition to this Heat roster. So we'll talk about what his offseason might look like. But before we do that, just a reminder that Sakara is all about feeling your best, and they want to help you feel your best by starting with what you eat. They've created a nice, healthy, balanced lifestyle that you'll truly enjoy with delicious plant-rich, transformational nutrition that builds a foundation for living in your best body. That's basically what it comes down to when it's Sakara. They see food as medicine. What you put in helps you feel better, helps you attain your health goals to a certain degree. And I think that's such a significant change in the perspective of different nutritional based diets and things of that sort. They want to make sure that you get the right nutrients that you need, and also something that's plant based and tastes great. And again, the convenience of having all these things prepackaged for you. No guesswork, no having to figure it out. I know vegetarian diets can be somewhat expensive as well, but you don't have to worry about that with Sakara. So, it's just a wellness company, again, that sees food as medicine. And I think you'll appreciate that kind of change in the perspective from a nutritional supplement like this. They get plant-rich ingredients that you'll absolutely be craving on a daily basis. You can't go wrong with their supplements there. And right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off their first order when they go to sakara.com. That's SAKRA.com/lockedon20. And you enter the code lockedon20 at checkout, you'll get 20% off for our listeners. That's great. Go to sakara.com/lockedon20 to get 20% off your first order. Sakara.com/lockedon20. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. Just as a reminder, we'll continue to provide great coverage throughout the offseason, whether it's the draft, free agency, potential trades, summer league action, you name it. Whatever you're interested in about this team, and I know that you're interested, or else you wouldn't be listening to the show, we're going to be providing you the best coverage that you've come to expect throughout the postseason. So make sure to subscribe to the show on multiple platforms if possible. But here we are in the midst of our exit interview series, still taking a look back at last season and looking ahead to the next season. And we'll do that with a pleasant surprise in the roster. That's Caleb Martin, one of the two Martin twin brothers. Caleb was a free agent. He was basically waived by the Charlotte Hornets. Didn't have a job in the NBA and wound up for the first time since I think ever, right? Wound up playing away from his twin brother Cody,
Yep.
who wound up being remaining with the Charlotte Hornets. They chose Cody. Caleb come to Miami, and at first, not everybody knows what to expect from him because again, he's a bench player who didn't get a lot of opportunity in his first couple of seasons with the Hornets. They didn't know how to use him well. He had some promise there as an athletic wing, but it didn't seem like it was really tying together in a significant way. Then he comes to Miami and boom, he's like this great compliment alongside Miami's starting unit. He comes in off the bench, provides a spark. The thing that I've always said about Caleb Martin throughout the regular season is that there was going to be every moment, any moment, at least one moment per game that was going to be incredibly memorable. Like whether it was a dunk, a steal, a high flying, crazy act of
Yeah.
some kind, a dunk or a block, something, and you were going to remember it. That's to me that has always stood out about Caleb this past season, and he wound up being a really great addition to this Heat roster. However, now he is a free agent. They changed they converted his two-way contract in the midst of last season so they could keep him for the playoff roster. He wound up being not a significant, a contributor, a rotation
Yeah.
player during the postseason. But now he enters free agency. Does he get big money elsewhere? What happens with his Heat tenure as it come to an end? What's your takeaway from Caleb's season?
Yeah, same as you. A little bit more specific. You said something memorable. I just felt like every game he just he would pick up a deflected ball and then take it down and dunk.
Highlight,
And it
yeah,
was just
yeah.
every single game. You could bank on it, right? You could put money on it and you would get a payout. But the big question is he going to resign?
Yeah.
In his exit interview, he said over and over again, I want to
Yep.
be here. I want to stay with the Heat. I want to stay in Miami, which sounds great. And I believe him when he says it. The problem is that the Heat are somewhat limited in what they can offer him. So they have the $10.3 million mid-level exception. As much as we love Caleb Martin, he's not worth $10 million a year, right? And so where like where do you end up going with this? Do you want to give him a portion of the mid-level exception? The Heat also have that $4 million biannual exception that I think is what they're going to be looking to give Caleb Martin. He's 26 years old. You mentioned
Mm.
the athleticism there. I think there's still some more upside to tap into. You'd like to, hopefully be a little bit less of a streaky 3-point shooter would probably be the offseason goal for him to work on. But I could see them going to him, hey, $4 million biannual exception. Will you take this? It's a nice raise still for Caleb Martin. I don't think he's going to get anywhere close to the mid-level exception on the open market. And I think that's probably a good compromise right there with that biannual.
Uh, like a 3 for 12 kind of deal.
Well, yeah, 2 for 8, 3 for 12, something like that.
Maybe with an option year, kind of like what Derrick Jones Jr. got, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of shades of the same thing where like he stood out here, he wound up thriving like so many other players have in the past, and he winds up going elsewhere and not really functioning quite as well. Not everybody knowing how to utilize these role players that suddenly find a way to thrive in Miami. And so I think that's certainly something to consider, at least something that's in Miami's favor too, is that there's a very, 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 very good chance, just based on past history, that if he goes anywhere else, he's not going to be as good. Maybe he'll get paid more, but he's not going to wind up being as functional. And so I think that's
Right.
certainly an ace in Miami's favor. I don't know. Not much else to say about Caleb other than he's a rotation player. You hope he comes in here
Yeah.
again, kind of similar to what we saw from Gabe Vincent. How much of it is the Heat versus how much how good is he actually as an individual player? I think it's a combination of both, but I think I certainly lean heavily towards Miami being able to continue to develop these players. What's your summer job for him?
So he's got so much energy, and
Hmm.
that's a real resource when you're talking about certain jobs. So I thought, could he be like an elementary school teacher, something like that, where
Right.
just you need to just be on all the time? But I don't think he would I don't think he would enjoy it that much. He seems to me more of like an outdoorsy kind of guy. Wants to get that
Really?
energy out. Wants to do things.
Maybe a summer
So
camp counselor.
he grew up like he went to school in Nevada. Could be
Hmm.
a summer camp counselor, but I have him more as a ski instructor. That takes a lot of energy, and then it also gives him that chance, like a couple hours a day, where he just can get away, go down, hit the slopes a little bit, get some of that adrenaline rush that he loves. So I got him as a ski instructor. Plus, I think he would look good with the glass, like those wraparound glasses that the
Okay.
skiers wear.
Silly
So
question. Are there is there still ski instruction over the off season, like during the summer?
I don't know. You're being very specific, and you're ruining my answer. So
Sorry. How about water ski instructor? That's what you meant, right?
there you go. Yeah. The back of a boat.
Well, I was trying to think of something more like in the kind of hijinks sort of way. Like to me, the fact that he's a twin, I've got him as a parking valet because one person could be parking cars, the other one could be driving off in those cars, like luxury cars, and nobody would know because like we saw him here the whole time. And
Right.
it's just that either Caleb or Cody is still taking keys,
And
while
they're
the
so
other brother's
mild
off
mannered,
running
you would
off.
never expect them. That's
Right,
perfect.
and the other one is driving off in a Lambo or something like that. I think it's great.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning into today's show. Again, we're going to be wrapping up our exit interview series with, I think, 4 players in our next one. So make
Yeah.
sure to stay tuned for that. We'll be talking about Victor Oladipo, the big offseason question for him. Does he re-sign in Miami? So make sure to check out that next episode. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Now, make sure to go check out Locked On NBA on their big board. Host Rafael Barlow from NBA Draft Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, Leif Thulin, and they all give fans an in-depth look into the NBA draft with mock drafts, player rankings, and of course, big boards. Who doesn't love that? It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.